The first man who told me I didn't belong on my own road had one hand resting near his holster, and the kind of confidence that only comes from thinking nobody's about to challenge you. I had just turned off the county pavement and onto the dirt road leading to my ranch when two black security trucks pulled sideways across the path and boxed me in. Then the guard leaned toward my window and said, "Step away from the vehicle." I stared at him, then at the brand new steel gate sunk into fresh concrete where open road had been 3 weeks earlier. Beside it, an electronic keypad blinked. A polished sign was bolted across the bars. Private Road HOA, Controlled Access. I laughed not because it was funny, because it was stupid in such an expensive way. 3 months earlier, I had legally bought 40 acres at the end of that road, old ranch land outside a Texas town. The deed was in my glove compartment, the access easement was recorded with the county, the title was clean, the law was clean. But the guard just shrugged and said, "HOA owns the road now. If you want access, talk to the board." What he didn't know was this. Before I bought that ranch, I spent 6 years working in land use litigation, easements, access disputes, developer games. I'd made a career out of watching people try to turn paperwork into power. So when he said the HOA owned the road, now I didn't argue. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Because somebody had just made a very expensive mistake. By the time I bought that place, I was sick of watching small landowners get pushed around by boards and developers who counted on one thing above all else: attrition. They just needed to make things frustrating and expensive enough that you gave up first. That's what I wanted away from. I wanted land. Wind, dust, fences, silence. I'd drive out before sunrise while the subdivision sprinklers clicked over perfect lawns, then roll onto the dirt road and feel the world change. The air smelled like dry grass and hot earth. Fence posts leaned. An old windmill creaked above a cracked trough. I spent my days replacing boards, tightening wire, clearing brush, patching metal, bringing the place back one honest repair at a time. When water finally splashed into that trough again, the sound echoed across the pasture like the land taking its first breath in years. Folks from nearby ranch properties would stop and offer advice. But the people from the subdivision across the road were different. They watched. The ranch had been harmless when it was abandoned, but once somebody actually owned it and started fixing it, it became unpredictable. And for people who worship control, unpredictability feels personal. That's how I met Elaine Foster. She pulled up one hot Saturday in a white SUV, stepped out in pressed jeans and a blouse, and introduced herself with the smile of a woman who had chaired too many meetings and won too many arguments by staying calm longer than everybody else. "I'm Elaine Foster," she said, "HOA president." Then she glanced at the road and told me that it was HOA maintained and they expected cooperation from neighboring property owners. "The access easement is recorded with the county," I said. She held my gaze, smiled that bloodless little smile, and said, "That can change." Then she left. 10 days later, I came back from a work trip and found the gate. 2 guards, cameras on posts, keypad, sign. And when I held up the recorded easement, one of them barely looked at it before saying, "We've been instructed not to allow entry without HOA authorization." I took photos of everything and went home, because emotion was exactly what they wanted from me. A shouting match at the gate would have made me look unstable and made them look organized, so I got quiet instead. I pulled county plats, development filings, old surveys, subdivision records, and there it was in black and white. The ranch access easement had been recorded 25 years before the subdivision was ever built. The developer built around it. The HOA had never had the power to erase it. They had just decided to act like they did. Then the letters started. Road maintenance fees, security assessments, warnings about non-compliance. One notice claimed I needed HOA approval for agricultural activity on land I couldn't even reach because of the gate they installed. Meanwhile, the rumors spread through town. At the feed store, someone asked if I was planning an industrial livestock operation. Inside that neighborhood, I wasn't a guy restoring an old ranch anymore. I was a threat to property values. Then came the twist they never saw coming. Buried in the board records was a line item labeled security infrastructure and road access control. I followed it into the financial disclosures and found the number that changed everything: $48,000. That's what Elaine's board had spent on the gate, the cameras, and the private security contract. No member vote, no visible legal opinion, just a handful of board members spending other people's money to block a recorded easement and hoping nobody looked too closely. I hired a local attorney whose office sat above a hardware store downtown. He studied the file, leaned back, and said, "They blocked legal access to your land." "That's not a misunderstanding, that's obstruction." He sent the demand letter that afternoon, direct, dry, and full of case law. Remove the gate. Stop interfering. Preserve all records. Elaine ignored it. She ignored the second one too. So we stopped asking nicely. 3 days later, I met a sheriff's deputy at the subdivision entrance on a pale blue morning. He reviewed the easement, the plat maps, the dates, then followed me to the gate. The guard saw the patrol truck and immediately started looking less certain about life. Elaine arrived a few minutes later, still polished, still composed but tight around the mouth now. The deputy asked who authorized the gate. She stepped forward and said the association had authority over roadway access within subdivision boundaries. He checked the easement again, then looked up. "This predates your subdivision. Our board voted to restrict non-resident traffic," she said. He didn't blink. "An HOA vote does not override a county-recorded easement. You cannot block this road." When he told them the gate needed to be opened immediately, the silence got heavy. One guard looked at Elaine. Elaine looked at the other board members. Nobody moved to save her. Finally, she gave the smallest nod, the keypad beeped, and the lock clicked open. The steel gate creaked back, inch by reluctant inch. I drove through without saying a word. Once the gate opened, the rest came apart fast. A homeowner inside the subdivision requested the financial records. Those numbers spread through the neighborhood like fire through dry grass. $48,000 has a way of waking people up, especially when it paid for something a sheriff's deputy just told you was unlawful. That Thursday's board meeting was packed. Residents wanted to know who approved the spending, whether legal counsel had signed off, why there had been no vote, why private security had been hired to block a non-member's access road. Elaine tried to frame it as protecting neighborhood integrity, but receipts have a way of making noble language sound cheap. Then county review started. Then the HOA's insurance carrier got involved. Then the security trucks disappeared. The cameras came down. Contractors showed up with cutting torches and dismantled the gate they'd planted so confidently in fresh concrete. Board members resigned. Elaine held on a little longer, but even she eventually stepped down. The settlement came quietly after that. The HOA agreed in writing to recognize the easement without condition. They paid my legal fees and documented losses. They agreed there would be no future restriction without a court order. A certified check showed up in the mail, and I won't lie, there is something deeply satisfying about learning arrogance has an invoice. People from the subdivision started walking over to talk to me. Some apologized for believing the rumors. One homeowner said, "We trusted them. We didn't know how far they went." And that stuck with me because that was the real lesson buried under all the anger. Most people are not villains. They're busy. They hear a confident voice, see a title, get handed a selective version of events, and let somebody else do their thinking. That's how bad leadership survives, not because it's strong, but because borrowed trust is easier than asking hard questions. A week later, I was resetting a fence post when a local rancher pulled up and said, "Heard about the gate. Figured you could use a hand." Before noon, 2 more neighbors had joined us. Later that afternoon, even a couple of subdivision residents wandered over with bottled water and work gloves. We set posts, stretched wire, laughed in the sun, and for the first time since all this started, that road felt like what it should have been from day one. Just a road, not a battleground. By late summer, the ranch was breathing again. I got the windmill running steady. Reinforced the fence lines. Brought in a small herd of cattle to let the pasture work again. Some evenings I sit on the tailgate and watch the sun drop behind the oaks while the cattle move through the grass, and the windmill clicks in the background. People ask whether it felt good to win. That's not really the word. What I felt was relief and clarity, because this was never about humiliating anybody. It was about something older and simpler than that. Ownership. If your rights can be taken just because somebody sounds confident enough, then they were never safe to begin with. Elaine thought authority came from a title, a board vote, a steel gate, a couple of guards with practiced lines. But ownership is not a mood. It is not a committee decision. It lives in the record, in the law, in the plain, stubborn truth of what belongs to whom. And maybe that's the bitter little lesson in all of it. Power gets dangerous when it goes unchallenged long enough to mistake itself for ownership. The gate is gone now. The road is open. The ranch is alive. And every time I drive through that entrance and head toward my land, I get the same quiet feeling in my chest, not revenge, not triumph, just the deep satisfaction of seeing karma arrive in work boots instead of a speech. So tell me this: when people in power cross a line and hide behind rules, titles, or good intentions, where do you think justice really begins? With the law, with public pressure, or with the first person who simply refuses to back down? And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a neighbor, or anybody who mistook control for ownership, tell me your story in the comments.